Welcome to Korean History Channel Behind Palace Walls. This video is a non-fiction content reconstructed based on historical facts and events. Some scenes may have been dramatized to aid viewer understanding.
Unlock powerful of the most tragic father and son relationship in Joseon history. But was Crown Prince Sado truly a monster-driven mad? Or is there a shocking truth only now coming into view after 276 years? On May 13th of the leap month in 1762, something unimaginable was happening in the back garden of Changdeokgung, a royal palace of Joseon. The Crown Prince of Joseon was locked inside a wooden rice chest, slowly dying. His father, King Yeongjo, a Joseon king, placed a stone on the lid and said coldly, "This is not a punishment I give as a father. It is a sentence I pass as a king." 8 days later, the prince, only 28, was dead. What could have driven a father and son to such a brutal end? And is the story we know today the truth, or a lie someone needed the world to believe? In January of 1735, Yeongjo finally had a son at the age of 51. He was overjoyed. Having taken the throne after King Jeongjo, the previous Joseon king, died suddenly, Yeongjo lived under constant disputes over legitimacy. To him, this child wasn't just an heir. He was hope, proof that the throne truly belonged to him. But Yeongjo was a ruthless educator. If the prince misread even a single line, the rod came down. If his manners displeased the king, he was made to kneel for hours. A king's son must be 10 times better than everyone else. That was Yeongjo's creed. The prince was brilliant. By 5, he had mastered the 1,000-character classic. By 7, he could recite passages from the Confucian classics with ease. Yet to Yeongjo, it was never enough. "At your age, I had already read the great learning cover to cover." He said it so often it became a habit. In 1744, Yeongjo made a startling decision. He would place the 10-year-old prince in charge of a regency, the youngest in Joseon history. Ministers objected, but Yeongjo refused to budge. To become a great king, he must learn governance early. But this was the beginning of disaster. The affairs of state were far too heavy for a 10-year-old boy. Factional fights, endless petitions, complicated complaints. Night after night, the prince was tormented by nightmares. And the bigger problem was Yeongjo. He overturned the prince's decisions one by one, then scolded him in front of the officials. "Can't you judge even this? I trusted you too much." The prince began to lose confidence. He read every night, but nothing stayed in his mind. When he tried to handle government work, his hands trembled. And the more he faltered, the harsher Yeongjo became. By 1752, when the prince turned 18, disturbing symptoms began to appear. He would suddenly tear his clothes, strike court women, go days without eating, then binge. But if you read the memoirs of Lady Hyejeong, a memoir written by Lady Hyejeong, something doesn't add up. The prince showed those symptoms whenever he faced Yeongjo, but in ordinary times he was gentle, loved learning, and cared deeply for the people. In other words, the prince's madness appeared only in front of Yeongjo. Was it truly mental illness or an extreme stress response? There's another telling detail. The prince often associated with scholars of lesser status and showed strong interest in reforming the rigid class system. In a court dominated by Noron Byokpa, a powerful political faction, that was dangerous. And because Yeongjo rose to power with Noron's support, he viewed the prince's leanings with suspicion. In 1758, discreet movements were noticed within the palace. A key figure was Hong Han, a leading member of Noron Byokpa, the brother of Lady Hyejeong. He repeatedly reported the prince's abnormal behavior to Yeongjo. They say the prince struck a court woman again. They say he drank through the night. They say he slipped out of the palace and frequented Kiseng houses in Hansong. But when you look at the Seung-jong-gwan Ilgi, the daily records of the royal secretariat, something strange appears. On the very dates Hong Han reported these incidents, the prince is recorded carrying out the regency normally, discussing policy with officials. How is that possible? Later in Hanjung-rok, Lady Hyejeong condemns her own brother, Hong Han. She writes plainly that he framed the prince out of greed for power. Why would she go that far against her own blood? Here's the core of it. Hong and Han and the Noronbyokpa feared a reform-minded prince taking the throne. If he became king, their privileges would be at risk. They needed a justification to remove him, and that justification became a single word: madness. Leap May 1762. The day finally arrives. Hong and Han delivers a fatal report to Yeongjo. A tip has come in saying the prince is plotting treason. Yeongjo is horrified. Treason? But where's the proof? Even if you comb through the annals of King Yeongjo, Joseon's official annals, you find no concrete evidence, only vague lines repeated again and again. The prince's conduct was improper. The country cannot be entrusted to him. On the 13th, Yeongjo summons the prince. In front of the court officials, he orders him to take his own life. The prince drops to his knees and begs, "Father, what crime have I committed? If I deserve death, then tell me my charge." But Yeongjo never names a specific charge. He only shouts, "How can you pretend you don't know what you've done?" The prince lifts a blade, yet cannot bring himself to die. Yeongjo's fury boils over. "You coward! Can't even kill yourself. Lock him in the rice chest." The prince is shoved inside. He is 28, young in his prime. The rice chest is a small storage box. Once an adult man is forced into it, there's no room to do anything but crouch and fold in on yourself. Lady Hyegyong falls to the ground in front of the chest, sobbing and pleading, "Your Majesty, please spare him." But Yeongjo is unmoved. "Drag her away." What's even more shocking is what Yeongjo does next. He posts a prohibition around the chest and declares that anyone who gives the prince food or water will be treated as a traitor. This is not confinement, it is an announced intention to kill. 8 days pass. In the heat of midsummer, the prince is left without even a single sip of water, dying slowly. Han Jung-rak records it in brutal detail. The first night, the prince cried, "I'm thirsty, give me water." The second day, he begged, "Father, I was wrong, please forgive me." The third day, only groans could be heard. From the fourth day, there was no sound at all. And yet on the sixth day, the cry, "Save me," was heard again. On the seventh day, it fell silent once more. But during those 8 days, something else is happening outside the chest. The Bibyeon Sadungnak, records of the Border Defense Council, notes that key figures of Noronbyokpa entered the palace frequently during this period. What were they discussing? While the prince was dying? On the 8th day, the 21st, the chest is opened. The prince is already dead. But the royal physician who examined the body leaves a troubling note. The condition of the corpse is somewhat different from that of someone who died after 8 days of starvation. What does that mean? Unfortunately, nothing more remains in the record. Perhaps someone made sure it wouldn't. What follows is even more revealing. After the prince's death, the political landscape changes immediately. Officials close to the prince are purged. Scholars of lesser status, along with reform-minded figures from other factions, are accused of treason and executed. Meanwhile, Hong and Han and Noronbyokpa tighten their grip on power. So we have to ask, was the prince killed because he was mad, or was he a political sacrifice? Historians who closely analyzed the Seong-jongwon ilgi found something striking. Most records claiming the prince showed madness rely almost entirely on reports from Hong and Han and his circle. In contrast, accounts by other officials who actually worked with the prince often describe him as intelligent and deeply concerned for the people. What matters most are the reforms the prince tried to push. During the regency, he proposed changes like these. First, reduce discrimination against people of secondary status. Open a path into government for those with talent. Second, reduce excessive taxes, especially the harsh burdens placed on the Samnam region. Third, reform the slave system, move gradually toward ending hereditary slavery. Each of these reforms threatened the privileges of Noronbyokpa. Their power rested on the class system and on control of land. There's more. 14 years after the prince's death, in 1776, Yeongjo dies, and the prince's son Jeongjo, a Joseon king, takes the throne. One of Jeongjo's first moves is to restore his father's honor, and in a stunning reversal, he condemns Hong and Han as a traitor and orders his execution. In Hongjae Jeonso, Jeongjo's collected writings, Jeongjo states, "My father was never mad. He died only because of slander by treacherous men. He loved the people and dreamed of reform, so he became a thorn in the side of those who clung to privilege. Jeongjo carries forward his father's vision and launches reform politics. He appoints figures like Park Jae-ga, Lee Dae-ok-moo, and Yoo Dae-ok-gong, establishes Gyu-jang-gak, the Royal Research Library, strengthens royal authority, and creates Jeongyong, an elite guard unit, to check Noronbyokpa's military and influence. Even then, Noronbyokpa keeps pressuring Jeongjo. They insist that reversing Yeongjo's decision would be unfilial, and they oppose restoring Sado's status. But Jeongjo refuses to yield. Do not forget, I am the son of Sado. This wasn't merely a cry of filial devotion. It was a declaration he would expose the political conspiracy that destroyed his father and carry out the reforms his father had dreamed of. But Jeongjo too meets a suspicious death. In 1800, at 49, he suddenly develops a boil on his back and dies. The annals of King Jeongjo describe a man in good health who passes away within only a few days. One reason many historians raise the possibility of poisoning. Sado's death wasn't merely the tragic end of a father and son relationship. It may have been a carefully engineered political killing. Yeongjo may have loved his son, yet he also depended on Noronbyokpa to secure his legitimacy. The prince dreamed of reform, but those dreams threatened entrenched power, and Hong and Han, along with Noronbyokpa, exploited the rift between father and son, until the prince was removed. The most tragic possibility is that Yeongjo may have known the truth himself. After the prince died, Yeongjo is said to have visited his son's quarters and wept. Some records say he kept repeating, "What have I done?" At the end of Han Jung-ruk, Lady Hye-kyung writes, "The prince was not mad, the world was." Even 276 years later, we cannot know the full truth of that day. But one thing is clear, it wasn't only a man who died inside that chest. The dream of reform, a politics for the people, the hope of a world beyond rigid status, those died with him. Much of what we know about Sado today is based on Han Jung-ruk. But Han Jung-ruk is a memoir written 40 years after the Shijin. Why did Lady Hye-kyung wait so long to leave this record? Perhaps she lived in an era where telling the truth was too dangerous. They say history is written by the victors. But sometimes our job is to search for the truth hidden between the lines. 8 days inside a rice chest, its truth still asks us questions even now. Thank you for watching. We'll return with more fascinating stories and intriguing topics. Behind Palace Walls, thank you.